folks, I'm Esther Emery. I'm the homestead wife over at the DIY and homesteading channel Falchamatic Offgrid. Today you're on my personal channel and it's a Thursday, so I'm just going to tell a story. I am at some point going to get back to doing tutorials on this channel. I've needed to slow down a little bit lately, and that's exactly what I want to tell about today, about the speed of life and what it means or what it takes to slow down. I don't know if you can tell from my voice or from the light, but it's quite early in the morning here. I've just finished my chores. The kids haven't even had their breakfast yet. And it's the beginning of fall. Last night was our first real soaking rain of the fall season. It's quite dry here. So for us, the rains of fall are evocative. They're meaningful. It's a time when we cozy up by the fire and put on our warm clothes, and it changes the rhythm of our lives from the full pace of summer into a more grounded, centered feeling of indoor activity and intellectual activity in the fall. Last night, my little Sadie, my 3-year-old, was begging me to do a puzzle with her. And this is a 49-cent puzzle that we got at a thrift store. It probably didn't even have all the pieces to begin with. But she'd been begging me to do this puzzle with her. And I realized that I'd probably said no to her a dozen times. And each time it seems plausible. It seems, oh, I don't have time right now. I really have to do such and such, or I really have to do this other thing. And those pressing concerns are real. You know, there really are places I've needed to be a dozen times when my 3-year-old asked me to help her do a puzzle. But last night it really struck me, partly because of the changing of the seasons, it really struck me that I don't want to live a whole life of never having time to do a puzzle. And that's a question that I face constantly. It's kind of one of the bones I chew in my life, and something that has affected a lot of the decisions that I make. I have a personality which is bent towards speed. I'm someone who likes a lot of accomplishment and can work very hard and enjoys setting my sights on a task, maybe even a big task, and really racing for that finish line to be able to have that sense of satisfaction and accomplishment at the end of the road. But I also burnt out this way. I burnt out terribly, horribly, with lack of sustainability. And I've also had a perspective, like I had with my 3-year-old last night, that sometimes I've been chasing after things not in my own control. That in some ways, when I say, I don't have time to do this thing because I have to do this other thing, what I'm expressing is a dependence and a lack of freedom in relation to all of the have-tos and the must-dos and the needs and the emergencies. And you live your life at this kind of fever pitch, and a completely ordinary, normal life, at this fever pitch of I've got to do this and I've got to do that, and it's one crisis after another. And I think that culturally, in my place and time, that's completely normal. So I've had a few experiences that are not completely normal, a few experiences that have counteracted that. One, I'll just describe as my wilderness experiences. Key among them is that I decided to drop off the internet. I decided to cut off all electronic communication for a period of 1 year. And that was, the motivations there are terribly confused. I was in a hard place in my life, and I just knew I needed to figure out how to live differently. So it's not entirely clear what I was trying to accomplish, but where I ended up was in a wilderness, in the sense of, I just read an article by Andrew Sullivan where he said silence is the new wilderness, which I think is true. Silence is the new wilderness. And I found myself in a place where my accomplishments just didn't mean much. I had lived years kind of in proximity to various kinds of greatness, usually at a pretty small scale, but I almost made it into a very prestigious graduate school program in an arts field. I almost made it to some level of excellence in my field of expression. I almost had a book published. I almost had, any number of things that would be recognized as accomplishment. And I had definitely weighed myself against those near successes, which in another language are called failure. I definitely had named myself by my relation to accomplishments in the eyes of the world. Well, in my wilderness experience, none of that mattered. And I tried my darndest to hold on to it till the very last minute. But at some point, I just had to realize that my value, my identity as a human being at the base level isn't linked to any accomplishment whatsoever. So I was transformed by the wilderness experience, but also part of this story is my off-grid experience, which I guess in more literal terms seems like more of a wilderness experience, but what I want to draw attention to is a survival experience. I think that in let's just say a suburban life. Let's just make an example of it. A suburban life where you have a series of things that you go to during the day and places that you go, and maybe you're in your car a lot, and you have a set of kind of check marks in your life that can feel very urgent, can feel very, very desperate that you need to accomplish all of these things. Well, there's no better antidote for that sense of truth than an off-grid life where you realize that there are much more basic needs. And that kind of survival need that triggers a panic, or should trigger a panic, should occur at the level of, let's say, food, shelter, and safety. Which is not to say that I don't think that things higher up, I don't know if you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy, but that the things higher up on this hierarchy of needs are not important. But that the animal urgency with which you approach getting to a soccer game on time, maybe that wasn't a good example, but the animal urgency with which you approach your errands, trying to get through traffic, trying to get through the next thing, is somewhat misapplied because it's left over from the way that we respond to getting fed, getting sheltered, getting clothed, and being safe. In my off-grid experience, although we have not been in a very dangerous situation, we have children and we have been careful, coming to a wall tent in the woods has given me the perspective of what is and isn't truly urgent. And those two combinations together, those two things in combination together, the wilderness experience, which you could say shattered my ego, and the survival experience, which you could say reestablished my connection to something I call reality, have together reframed my idea of what it is to have an urgent need in life. What it is that I should run for. What it is that should be strong enough and urgent enough to make me tell my daughter I don't have time to do that puzzle. Of course, I do still live in the world. I have my internet life and I have my writing life. And I find myself needing to reground, which is why I'm sitting here this morning. That's why I'm sitting here in front of my pond early in the morning, still wearing my clothes from doing the chores, because I need to reconnect to these truths. You can learn something, but I find that you have to come back around and learn it again and again. And this is a perfect opportunity for me to do that, to say, I need to reconnect to these treasures that I found when I went out into the wilderness and found this treasure of living loved. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. And then I came to this off-grid life and I found this treasure of what I call reality, a sense of being a physical being in a space where I have certain needs that need to be taken care of. And I can apply that with my own hands. I can act against that with my own hands and my own intelligence. This is a gift to be able to connect to that reality and shake some of the distracting, glittering things about a contemporary life in North America or in what we call the developed world that can really distract from your humanness and your capacity to maintain your own survival. And also to be the most and best that you can be as a person. Well, for all this talk about slow, you might think that I'm a patient or contented person, or that I don't need to do a lot in life. But if you all have tracked me, you know that I actually have characteristics of the opposite of that. I do a lot. I work hard. I accomplish a lot, and I have big dreams. So it's been a goal for me to crack the code between a full life and a desperate life. What is it to take advantage of these personality characteristics that I have? A person who loves to run, who loves to accomplish, who loves to do a lot, who isn't afraid of hard work and is willing to kind of wrap my arms around a challenge and just stick with it until I master it, until I make it into what I've dreamed for it to be. How do I take all these characteristics and make them into something healthy rather than allowing them to be the weak point or the Achilles heel by which the world drags me against my will into a life that's desperate and based in scarcity? And the trick that I have found is to live loved. So when I think about the worst times for me of working too hard and being constantly out of breath, I think about what my goals were, how I wanted so much for the world to tell me I was enough. I wanted so much for people to tell me I was good enough, I was beautiful enough, I was smart enough, I was capable enough. How much I wanted that validation to say, yes, Esther, you're worthy, you're it, you're in, you're okay. And how painful it is to live a life like that. And of course, we all have moments like that. But when that really takes over and you're just panting on a hamster wheel, trying to prove that you belong, trying to prove that you're okay, trying to get whatever kind of proof that you need to say that, yes, you are enough and you are worthy of love. And then the alternative. What does it feel like to say, I am already beloved. I am already loved. I am already enough. And because of that, I have the capacity to act in generosity. I can act in generosity. I can do the most that I possibly can do. I can run the hardest that I can. I can give everything that I can. I can grow as much food as I can because I am already loved. And I have this ability to be generous and to live out of a place of abundance rather than a place of scarcity. And if you look at your daily schedule or your to-do list, your to-do list doesn't tell you whether you're living out of scarcity, out of abundance. The YouTube videos of my life don't say whether I'm living out of abundance or out of scarcity. The only place that's really clear is right here. But there are some clues. If you're living out of abundance, you probably have more capacity to say to the 3-year-old, you know what, I will make time to do that puzzle because I'm not afraid that by doing the puzzle, I'm going to miss out on something else. You're probably more able to sit in front of the pond someday in the morning and say, I have the capacity to take this time to reconnect with what matters most. And maybe for you, hanging out with me, you won't have to go through either the wilderness experience or the survival experience to receive these nuggets of wisdom in terms of finding your way to a deeper, truer, and maybe slower life. I'm Esther Emery. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next week.